New Year?
First one of the new year, man.
Oh my
All right.
gosh, that's right.
So we are live here. Welcome to the first episode of 2025 of the Vibes and Ventures podcast. I am Steve Walsh, also known as the Hands-On Angel. Have we decided, Rob, are we going with Startup Alchemist? Is that locked in? So this is my friend Rich News, who now will be known as the Startup Alchemist. So we've changed the Twitter handle. We're ready to go. 2025, he's coming out of the gate strong. Startup Alchemist, Rob Hughes.
The death of Ozempic Thor, although his reign was short and not particularly memorable, it was a lot of fun. So we had a good time, but all good things must come to an end. So we're now full on Startup Alchemist, rolling forward into 2025. Positive direction out.
I like the Startup Alchemist. That has legs, man.
Yeah, I mean, the handle wasn't available because there's too many characters, but I do my best.
It's okay. It's all right. It's who you are. I love it. It's fantastic.
We all can't have such
no longer badass banker. Startup Alchemist. I like it.
Yeah, I love that animation you sent me from Hands-On Angel too. Like, the people are gonna freak out when they see it. It's good.
Dude, not bad, huh? Not bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the way I just did it was pretty spot on too.
My brother's like, that's pretty. My brother's like, that's pretty awesome. I go, oh yeah, that's got legs. It's badass.
You're still holding out on me.
Which is fucking awesome. So
you're supposed to send me the name of your intern. I mean, you're holding out on me. What's going on?
Listen, easy. I can't share all my resources with you, man. I'm just kidding.
Not all of them, just the ones I want.
Yeah, exactly. She's gonna be like, next year she's like, I can't do this anymore because Rob just hired me.
Like, look, just pick the one that you think has the best hair.
Well, then, unfortunately, you're gonna have to go start blow drying again.
I did blow dry. This is a big blow dry. I had a big blow dry day. In fact,
the fact that your wife thinks it's weird is awesome.
She's getting on board though. She's like, okay, we just gotta get the right kind of product in there, and we got something. I was like, okay, as long as you
so now that your new handle is live, you are blow drying, which is great. We're gonna jump into my three things, man. So what's your first thing?
Oh, am I going first?
You could we'll go back and forth though. What's your first one?
All right, we can go back and forth. My three things brought to you by us because we are not sponsored yet.
Nope.
Big emphasis on yet. Here we go. We start off strong with our good friend Peter Walker, who, again, the man, the myth, the legend, couldn't be a nicer, more informed person. This is really an interesting one. 109 startups closed after raising $20 million plus.
I like this.
I love this one too. And I think the punchline is right here, the last sentence. The hit rate on VC investment didn't get meaningfully better in the boom time, so shutdown stories will continue to come. So I'm wondering what that number and that tally is going to end up being. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a change of behavior as a result of deploying massive amounts of capital into companies, maybe a little prematurely, maybe a little bit into a frothy time, but like, is there a behavioral change if the good times start going again? Or are we going to see a repeat of this cycle if things start ramping up again? My guess is it's going to be somewhere in the middle. We're going to see some behavior that is more aligned with what we were seeing in 2022 and 2023. And I think we're going to see, 2021 is 2022, sorry. And then we're going to see some that are going to keep a little bit more discipline on their thesis and on their valuations, on how much money they're giving, how much capital they're giving to founders to prove out what they're doing. I think this is going to be, again, a big separation between the ones who have a vision of the future and are investing in technologies that fundamentally change the way we live and work, and ones that are just sort of following on to trend lines and hoping to catch magic in a bottle.
Right, Rob, isn't this just the reality that half of these companies that got funded should have never been funded in the first place? They just weren't. They didn't have the business fundamentals that startups have to have nowadays, which is, get your whiteboard and a dream and come back to me when you have 10 paying customers.
Okay, I'm going to say some of it's that, and then some of it was the lack of ability for founders to recognize that the temperature in the room had changed and the behavior pattern needed to change. So it was no longer about blowing out capital at all costs to acquire growth and get to the next round. It was more about figuring out a way to continue to grow while extending your runway and being really thoughtful about where you were spending your time and resources and what was mission critical and what was nice to have. And so I think that there's a little bit of like, hey, some of these companies shouldn't have gotten funding. But more importantly was a little bit of a coming to grips with which operators were really good at working with what they had and making the best of it and saying, look, this is not the gravy train's up. I got to make this last. How do we continue to grow if no more money comes in the door? Because we got to continue to grow. We're venture capital backed. We have to grow.
Yeah. And
how do we do that in the right way?
And at the same time, a lot of them raised at valuations that were just too high, that when it became time to grow again and do the next round, they couldn't grow into that new valuation. So I saw companies at the pre-seed stage raising 2 on 20. So their seed round had to be like 5 on 50, and they didn't have the revenue to support it. So the capital just dried up. It's not because there wasn't dry powder. People looked at the valuation and said, you're doing a couple $100,000 in revenue. You can't raise it a $50 million valuation. What are you, out of your mind? And the capital dried up. That also happened.
I would love to see, maybe I'll hit up Peter about this, or maybe, I know Card is supposed to be giving us access to this sort of data, but I do wonder if there's any correlation to like down rounds versus bankruptcies. And what I mean by that is like the number one reason for bankruptcy is people's inability to downgrade their lifestyle. That's what leads to bankruptcies in like personal finance. And I'm wondering if there's some correlation between down rounds for valuations of companies and the subsequent shutdowns because they're unable to deal with their let's say slightly diminished valuation on paper.
Interesting. That was a good leadoff. I like that. That was a good number one for my 3 things. So the
other 2 are complete garbage. So I thought I would start strong.
And came out of the gates really strong in that. Good for you. Good hair, good start, good everything right now.
I should Costanza and just leave. You know what I mean?
Good handle. You're out. You're out. Like when he got the first laugh and he goes, there it is. I'm out.
There it is. I'm out.
I'm out. So my number one for my 3 things is something called the Rule of 78. Have you ever heard of the Rule of 78, Rob?
Yes.
So for those that don't know, what the Rule of 78 is, there are 12 months in the year. And if you add the month numbers, 1 + 2 + 3 + 4, all the way to 12, you get to 78. It's also a finance term. It's typically used in loans, but it's also used in business. And what the Rule of 78 is you multiply the amount of new revenue you expect to bring in each month by 78 to get your yearly sales forecast. So that's how you do it. The one caveat is that you have to add a new customer every month at the same rate, at the same fee for this to work. And why is this important? What it basically teaches, not just founders, but any company, is that the beginning of the year, specifically Q1, is the most important quarter. Because if you start a company in January and sell a customer, you get 12 months of billing. And then in February, you sell another customer. You get 11 months of that customer, but you still have 11 months of the customer you sold last month. So you start to get compounding revenue. And what I used to tell my employees when I worked in corporate America, and now I tell my founders in the gig I do now, is that January makes your Q1, Q1 makes your year. A customer that you sell in Q1 and bill in Q1 is exponentially more valuable than a customer you sell, say, in Q4, because if you sell them in October, you're only going to get 3 months worth of revenue, versus if you sold them in Q1 in January, you're going to get 12 months worth of revenue. It's almost like compounding interest in the banking industry, Rob. And I think founders sometimes miss that. And I had a lot of tweets and LinkedIn messages this week where people talking about, let's get the plan for the year going. Let's really start to think of where we're going to start strong. And I'm like, if you wanted Q1 to be strong, you need to be planning for that in Q4. Like you needed to be coming out of the gates January 1st and signing your first customer, getting your first deal, getting that revenue done. And I think sometimes I see founders sort of taking hey, it's January, it's the hangover from the holidays, let's ease into the year. I think it needs to be just the opposite. I think it needs to be Q4. You actually can take your foot off the gas a little bit and plan for the coming year. But Q1, you need to come out firing. But I'd love your take on it.
I think the interesting part about it too is like it doesn't feel like January is the season of change. And so if you're trying to get a company to buy your product or a consumer to buy your product, or if you're trying to get someone to change their behavior, which is what fundamentally most startups are trying to do in one way or another, that's the best time to do it when they're in the mood or in the season of change. And so if you miss that opportunity because you got the hangover from the holidays, or you went too hard in Q4 and didn't spend the time smartly and refreshing and restoring yourself and being ready and preparing for Q1, you might miss a window of opportunity to really start building the basis of a great year. The foundation of a great year starts in Q1. That's just what it is. And so you miss that opportunity, you're not going to get it again.
You're absolutely right, man. Absolutely right. That was a good one. What's your number 2?
Oh, I thought we were going to go back and forth. It's okay. It's okay. I'm ready. I've already got it ready to go.
We are going back and forth. The tennis ball just came across the net.
I know, but I thought you were going to go 2 for 1, like kind of make it, take it style.
No, so you pay extra for that.
Well, I'm not getting paid anything. All right, so this is the funding for US VCs since 2022. So we've talked about this one-on-one. I think we've talked about on the pod. It's not a big mystery, but if VCs aren't getting funding from LPs, then VCs are unable to fund startups. Like, it's very, very simple. If LPs are not funding the funds cannot fund startups. And so when you're looking at this graph, it's really easy to see there was a big bubble that happened in 21 into 22, and where the funding for venture capital funds has never been higher. And then then once it starts taking a dip, now we're back down to 2018 levels. I would say we're probably going to see more uptick from here, but it was a bit of a correction. That is, by definition, what a bubble looks like. I mean, look at that thing. That thing's pretty.
That's insane.
Oh my God, it looks like a roller coaster ride, right?
It looks like something from Canopy Lake Park.
Right. So if you survive this section, this little downward slope here, and you put your hands up instead of grabbing onto the bar and you said, whee, you might have a great time in 2025.
That's awesome. I like that. It's, but the good news is it's sort of back to, I call it, it's back to levels that were pre-banana zone, which was 2021, 22. So it hasn't fallen off a cliff. It's just come back to sort of some sort of normalcy, which is not a bad thing. Like, people have this vision of, like, there's no money out there, there's no dry powder. That's not the case at all. In fact, I know funds that are $200-300 million funds that sat on their hands last year, and they have plenty of dry powder. They just didn't deploy it because they didn't know. There was a lot of uncertainty. What's going to happen with the election? What's going to happen with recession? They had spent so much the prior 2 years and hadn't seen a return, or companies were going out of business, so they pulled back a little bit. I just think we're back to some semblance of normalcy now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons or like rationale that we could apply to it, but just the overall lack of directionality or people having high conviction about where things are heading led to a reticence to writing checks. And so there's plenty of money still on the sidelines. There's plenty of money to be deployed, but you know that's. It could be a great year, could not be, but who knows? I just think if we can get in order to see sort of growth at the rate we would like it to be in the industry, we need to have LPs funding venture capital funds, maybe not at the rate of 21, 22, but somewhere, let's split the difference, let's not be at the bottom of that graph, but let's be middle way up, and we'll have some ability for those emerging managers to get in there, because those are the ones that really play at the pre-seed seed stage. And so when you're not having funding going to those first-time fund managers, you're really going to have a drought on having any institutional investors at the pre-seed and seed levels. You really need them because they're more sophisticated. They're building those relationships up with the funds that we're following on. Yeah. A lot of them are coming out of industry, have little levers that they can pull that can make a huge difference for companies. So they're more agile and able to get things done on the whole than some larger funds. I heard a
statement on a pod recently that said some of these funds are not going to need to be as big going forward or deploy as much capital because the cost of building a business is less. You need less headcount, less people. Technology is outpacing the need for headcount. So these funds, these mega funds, these $1 billion, $2 billion funds are going to get left at the altar because they're going to have too much capital and not enough to deploy.
I don't know about the second part of that statement, but I agree with the first part of that statement. I was just in a conversation with a really great entrepreneur last week, and he was talking about how he redid his entire technology stack to sit on top of like an LLM. And so now he can deploy features within minutes versus weeks. So he scrapped his existing technology, put it all onto a new based on artificial intelligence capabilities to be able to build technology very quickly in a more agile way. And he's like, it's going to cost me in the long term 1/100th of the cost to build it this way versus how I was going to do it before. That is, maybe he's on the bleeding edge of it, but I don't think so. I think he's like towards the front of the pack on it. People are going to start adopting that. And the way he explained it to me is like, remember when people moved on cloud, and if you weren't on cloud, you were behind the curve. That's how it's going to be if you aren't leveraging AI to help you build software faster. So
Totally.
he's definitely preaching to my choir of like, hey, SaaS is now becoming a commodity. How do you stand out? But within that framework, you're right. The necessary capital to build technology is going to be the number that you're going to need to build it from a like dollar standpoint is going down. So then it becomes, is there a way to leverage that money in better ways to fuel growth? Maybe that's where the capital gets reoriented or realigned. But I do think you're going to see less companies raising more significant rounds. I think it's going to get a little bit like 1, 2, maybe like 4 rounds and then your IPO. Because it's your capital efficiency is going to be
nice if we actually had some friggin' IPOs this year. We've had like none.
I think we are.
I think we will. I agree with you.
My opinion, we're going to see a return to the IPO market.
I would agree. Listen, it's good for everything. It drives the economy. It honestly, one of the problems, Rob, is that most of the United States, 90% of the United States out there cannot participate in private markets because they're not qualified investors. They're not qualified purchasers. They don't have the net worth to do it. And the government hasn't stepped up and said, hey, you can take a test, or if you're, it's ridiculous. So IPO and public companies is the way they can participate in venture, and they've been locked out because no one's went public the last couple of years. I think that has to change.
Well, there's another piece of that too that I'm probably not
that little thing called liquidity for founders, which they'd like, would be nice.
Yeah, I'm on board with the liquidity for founders, and I think people are finding creative ways to get that done. I think where some companies are choosing not to IPO because the regulatory requirements. Once you IPO, there's much more oversight that happens. There's the quarterlies, everything gets a little bit tighter, and so you have less flexibility to innovate. So, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, that if we can deregulate some of the things that keep companies once they become public from being able to be as nimble as they were when they were privately held, or so bring that a little bit more towards nimbleness, and then bring the startup private market a little bit more towards structure, we can meet in a happy middle that doesn't make it like you're turning on this switch of like, oh my God, now all of a sudden I have to act in a way that's totally unusual for us culturally and as employees and as a board and as a management team. It's almost like we need like an engagement period for startups where it's like you're not just dating and then getting married, you're engaged and you're sort of more like moving towards this idea of like more structure, but not as much structure as you might have in a marriage. Yeah.
So my number 2 for my 3 things is KPIs versus goals. And I think sometimes early stage founders blend the two. And to me, they're actually very different. So KPIs, or key performance indicators, are things that founders in most cases should be managing, hopefully monthly. Some of my founders manage these weekly. And that could be, MRR, growth, customer counts, product launches, etc. And then you have goals, which are, higher lofting quarterly, annual, monthly goals. And I think the way I look at it, and the reason I segment the two, is that KPIs are really a check-in on the health of the business and how it's doing. And goals are really a check-in on your vision for the business. Are we aligning what we're doing to our greater vision and longer term vision? And I do think they're independent. I think they should be tracked differently. I think they should be tracked at different timelines. KPIs are more today. Goals are more longer term. It can be tracked in a longer track. But what are your thoughts?
I'm just thinking, I couldn't get out of my head the Patriots yesterday. And like the KPI of like, let's get another win got in the way of the goal, which was secure the number 1 pick that you can leverage into more picks or give you an unfair advantage going into the offseason where your roster needs multiple players that you can plug in that can play and contribute to the team. And instead you sacrifice your your long-term goal for a KPI today. I don't know that those necessarily.
Dude, it's an awesome analogy because Bob Kraft's on right now doing a press conference explaining his decision. And the other thing I took away from yesterday, and I think it's a sign of someone that's a good leader, people don't realize Kraft's known Gerard Mayo since he was 21 years old, 17 years. He played for him. He went to a Super Bowl. He was a coach, then a head coach. He's got a very deep personal and spiritual relationship with Gerard. But at the end of the day, he sat back yesterday and said, what's the goal? It's to win championships. It's to put a great product on the field because my customer, the fan, deserves better. And he made a decision not with his heart and not with the relationship. He made a decision that was the best for the greater good and for the business because it aligned to his greater goal and vision. And that's really friggin' hard to do. And a lot of people are giving him shit today. I looked at it and said, that's someone that understands at the end of the day, the business has to survive, and it's the business he chose, and ultimately he has to serve his customer, even at times when it doesn't serve himself.
Yeah, and I don't want to turn this into a sports broadcast, so I'll go off on a little tangent here. I was just watching you talk, and with your kind of whitish hoodie in your sort of beach background, and on the top left of your corner of your screen says creator. You know, given a different voice in a different context, you could be the creator, you know?
That's fucking awesome. Oh, mic drop. See ya.
All right, we Costanza twice. How many times am I going to do this?
You're out. Costanza, done.
I want to make one more football point because I'm done for the year, which is like, I feel so good that the season's over. But I saw that Mike Evans, and I watched this kind of closely to see if he'd do it. He got the 1,000 yards.
Oh, wow.
And he got it, and despite missing 3 games this year. But he's like, I think it's some sort of record for consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. And I think they risked the game in the playoffs to get him that record. And so I had like sort of mixed emotions about him accomplishing it. It's like, hey, he did the thing, but it almost cost the team the chance of the playoffs. And it's kind of like check the box. He got 1,004 yards. It's like, I get it on the one hand. And on the other hand, you go, man.
Dude, how about last thing on football? How about the guy from Buffalo yesterday, Von Miller, getting the 1 sack he needed to get $1.5 million bonus, and he got it against the Patriots. Yeah, and then he sat the rest of the game.
Yeah, that game was embarrassing. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Right, okay, let's go to my third. Let's go to my third thing. All right, I'm going as soon as I can get my buttons straightened out. Okay, another frequent guest or feature on the show is Dan Gray at Credit Stick. If you're not following, you should follow. And apparently my share screen didn't work. Hold on. Am I sharing?
Now you are.
Okay. Thank God. Is it going now? There we go. Good Lord. Sometimes I'm also a boomer. So this is just a longer post. There's a nice graph in here talking about the percentage of we can click on it. Give me a second. The percentage of the 10 largest VC firms in 2024, their share of the venture capital money raised. You can see in 2024, it was unhealthy. Almost over 50% of all of VC funding that for funds, so LP money going to funds, over 50% went into the top 10, which is unbalanced as it's going to get. I'm going to go back. I have a double share. I don't know how that looks on your screen, but it looks funky on mine. This is the thing I want to talk about. Altogether, I think there's a real cause for optimism in 2025 and seeing balance restored to the force. Yes, we're all in for balance. We're all in for seeing the return to parity as far as the number of funds getting funding and how that echoes down to founders at various stages. If the only funds that are getting funding are the top 10, we have an over 50%, and that's what we had in 2024. That has repercussions. The ripple effects get felt by all over the ecosystem. And there's a lot of great companies that are going to have to find alternate forms of funding to fuel their growth as a result. But if we can get that back down to levels in the 20 to 30% range, we have a lot more of a healthy ecosystem or environment where more founders that need venture capital funding to grow at the rate they need to get a lead and keep a lead and to grow, to become a category leader. That's where the magic happens in my mind. It's 25, 30%. We're way out of balance at 55. I think we're almost 60% in 2024. That's just way too heavy on that end. It needs to come back down. When it gets back down that 25 35% range. That's where
One of the
it
top
happens.
alternate sources of capital. I mean, obviously you're in banking, so you could go to your bank. You could do that short term. You could do invoice factoring. Like, what are some others?
So private credit's been a huge, huge change of the game where you have innovative companies that have found new ways to leverage your growth as a company to give you access to capital, non-dilutive capital. So there's a lot of those options that are popping up. I think private equity is kind of squeezed down into some of these more profitable companies, and they're looking for acquisitions or putting funding into companies that they think could be a great part of their portfolio. And then you look at the how far the dollar can go when you're not spending as much of a percentage-wise on building technology. You can get a lot done for a lot less now.
Right.
So I do think there's going to continue to be a change in how capital gets constructed around for companies, especially in different verticals. And I think when there's change, there's opportunity.
Oh, that's a tweet. Tweet it right now.
Right now.
When this change.
I'm on my computer. I can just go to my other screen.
This is
I'm
it.
So
when there's change, there's opportunity.
Hold on. We're going to do it live.
Live. Just
Okay.
Right out there. This is what, by the way, welcome to what Rob and I do pretty much all day long when we have just spare seconds. Here it is. That'll show up in my feed in like 2 seconds.
Oh my God.
See?
Go ahead. Why don't you lead off on your last thing?
All right, so my last thing, it's a little touchy-feely, but I think it's a good one. So I'm going to put this quote into the room chat for those that are here, and I will state it for those that aren't. So I saw this quote the other day, and the quote is, "The foundation you come from is the rock that steadies you in the climb." And it says a lot about the early stage founders that you and I work with. It also says a lot about my life, which is, you are sort of where you come from, and the people that surround yourself with steady you. And we had sort of this cool thing happen at my house this weekend. So just give people some context. I have two sons, 17 and 23. One's a junior in high school. One lives in California. My mom is 84 years old, and she moved back to Boston about a year and a half ago to be closer to us because she's getting older. And when you get older, everything just becomes a little bit harder. So she lives in a retirement community. And we had a family dinner at my house on Saturday night. And it was and my oldest son said, "Hey, can we do a family dinner?" I said, "Sure, no problem." And I always cook for everything because my mom's it's not too old to cook. It's harder for her to cook. So I cook for everybody. And he's like, "No, I want to cook." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I want us to cook as a family. Nana, me." Because when my son was like 4 years old, he learned how to cook in my mother's kitchen. And we have video and pictures of him when he was little. And he goes, "I haven't cooked dinner with Nana in like 10 years. And that's what I want to do." So I went out and bought all the food, and we did a family dinner. My mother, my wife helped, all of us, the kids. And then all of us, and my son's sort of an old soul, and he's really getting into like 50s and 60s music, which was my mother's era. And this song came on, and all of a sudden, like a dance party breaks out in my house. So I'll share my screen. And this is, you can see, right?
Yeah. Oh.
So, pretty cool moment for me to witness that, and also was sort of a reminder of, all of them are part of the foundation of who I am. And it really brought me back when I saw the quote to thinking about the founders that we work with, and that everybody comes from somewhere. We all think at times we're alone, and the reality is none of us do this alone. We just don't. We have who you surround yourself with. In my world, that's my family, that's my friends like you. And I just thought this quote was pretty cool, and that was my third thing for today. So I just want to share that. So
after all, you had two opportunities to Costanza cut the pod short and end on a high note, and I'm glad we didn't because that was the highest note. It's like that's a peak moment right there. That was awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I really enjoyed it. I don't know what song that was, but
the song was called "Run Around Sue."
Okay.
It was in a lot of just 50s and 60s movies, and the funny thing is, I said to my mom, I'm like, "Mom, this is a great playlist." And my 23-year-old's like, "Hey, it's my playlist." I'm like, "What are you doing listening to this music?" He's like, "I love this music. I listen to it all the time." I'm like, "Serious?" He's like, "Frankie Valli, The Temptations." I'm like, "You're kidding me." He's like, "Oh no,
that's incredible.
Old soul."
That's it. That's awesome. Credit to you. That's incredible.
And look at that, 29 minutes on the nose.
Babe, if we could get this type of efficiency at Bucket List in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be pumped. I'm
Where's
telling
this
you,
efficiency in my life? This is awesome.
this is the only thing that we do efficiently in our whole lives, Steve.
And
We
it
gotta channel this energy.
We really do. We really do. Yeah, I need to get more efficient in other areas. So that was awesome. 30 minutes door to door. My three things. Thank you for joining episode 1 of 2025 of the Vibes and Ventures podcast. For the Startup Alchemist, my friend Rob Hughes, I'm Steve Walsh, also known as the Hands-On Angel, and we'll see everybody next week.
Yes, sir. I love the awkward beginnings and endings when we can't find the record button.
It crucifies